The first time I saw them, the world was white and dead silent. It was a silence I had cultivated for 4 years, a thick, heavy blanket of it that sat on my shoulders like a ghost. I was Caleb Stone, a man carved from the hard rock of these mountains, and solitude was my wife. My wife, Lyra, and our baby boy who never drew a full breath. The measles took them in the bitter winter of 2074. First the fever, a fire that burned away their life. Then the actual fire, the one I set to everything they touched, everything that smelled of them, of their hope and my failure. Since then, I'd lived in a husk of a home, a cabin built for a family of 3 that now housed a hollowed-out man of 46. I didn't talk to anyone. I didn't drink, didn't gamble, didn't open my door for anyone. My world was defined by the endless cycle of chopping wood, mending fences, and trading my labor for dried meat and ammunition in the distant town of Haven. The only sound was the wind, the creak of my cabin, and the mournful calls of the coyotes. That was until that December morning when the sound came, soft, uneven footsteps crunching through the fresh powder on the trail that wound from the pass. My body reacted before my mind. I set down the carving knife, the unfinished pine horse falling from my lap, and stood from the rocking chair on my porch. My hand went to the worn grip of the revolver on my hip. A man. A beast number. Too light for a horse, too rhythmic for a bear. I stepped down into the yard, the cold biting at my face. They appeared slowly around the cedar fence line, 3 figures, as if unsure they'd reached anything at all. All 3 were barefoot, their clothes torn and thin against the deep cold. The oldest, a woman who looked to be in her late 30s, was tall and square-shouldered, with cuts on her arms and a busted lip. Her black hair was tied back in a makeshift wrap, and she walked with a fierce purpose, even as her stride betrayed a deep pain. The middle one, maybe mid-20s, limped, her dress slipping off one shoulder, the fabric torn away to reveal a thin bruising around her collarbone. A hand clutched at her side, her fingers twitching with a raw uncertainty. The youngest, barely out of girlhood, stuck behind the other 2 like a shadow, a worn blanket wrapped around her like a shield. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just watched. The oldest one, Ayla, though I didn't know her name yet, raised her chin. Her dark eyes, bruised and tired, met mine without flinching. "We need shelter," she said, her voice raw but steady. "We don't aim to steal. We just need a few nights. We'll work." She didn't plead, didn't explain. She just stated a fact. The girl behind her, Mina, looked ready to crumble. Her wide eyes flickered from the tree line to the dirt to the sky, a bird ready to bolt. The middle one, Lyra, shifted her weight, trying not to lean too hard on her bad ankle. She didn't look at me directly, only downward, as if waiting for a blow or a door to be slammed in her face. My jaw clenched. The bruises told me enough, the torn fabric, the way none of them would meet my eyes for long. I'd seen those looks before in the aftermath of cruel men and terrible things. My eyes went from the pump by the fence to the barn, then back to the 3 women. I gave a single nod. A small, almost imperceptible gesture. They stood frozen for a moment. Then Ayla moved first, guiding Lyra, gently glancing at me only once more. I didn't stop them. I didn't speak. But I didn't reach for my pistol, and more than anything else, that told them they were safe. For now, I didn't offer them the house. Not yet. But I opened the barn door wide. Inside it was clean. I kept it that way. Fresh straw, a full water barrel, and extra blankets folded near the workbench. I'd slept in that barn myself more nights than I could count, unwilling to face the ghosts in my own home. That night they slept in the loft. And I sat on my porch, shotgun across my thighs, watching the winter moon turn the snow to silver. My mind was a whirlwind of noise, a storm I hadn't felt in years. Was I a fool, letting strangers and women who might be hunted? But then I remembered Lyra's limp, the way Mina clung to her sister like a child, her voice never rising above a whisper. And I remembered how Ayla hadn't flinched, had looked at me square, though bruised and filthy, and said, "We'll work." The next morning I stayed away from the barn. I hauled firewood, fed the mule, repaired a fence gate hinge. When I came back, my tin cup was clean, placed upside down by the wash basin. The water bucket was emptied and refilled. Someone had even scrubbed the trough and neatly recoiled the rope I used to haul water from the well. I squinted toward the barn. Lyra stood just outside, scooping hay into the mule's pen. Her movements were careful, slow from her limp, but steady. Her shawl had slipped down her back, exposing the dark sweep of her hair and the torn neckline of her dress again. She didn't pull it up. Maybe she didn't notice. Or maybe she had stopped caring. She didn't glance at me, but she must have known I was watching. Inside, Ayla was stacking kindling by the stove. Mina sat near the fence line, half hidden, her legs drawn up beneath her dress. She looked toward me briefly, then quickly down again, a nervous twitch in her fingers. That day I left food on the porch, smoked meat, a can of beans, coffee grounds. I said nothing. Just went back to working the south fence. When I returned, the food was gone, the plate cleaned, and left exactly where I had set it. The women stayed another night, then another. No demands, no questions, no raised voices. I didn't ask what had happened, but I knew. Not the details, not the names, but enough. Enough to keep the barn door open. Enough to lay out 3 more blankets in the loft. Enough to sit outside each night with my shotgun resting easy, my eyes on the dark line where the hills met the sky. I hadn't wanted company in years, but I wasn't a man to shut the door on someone already torn down. And they weren't asking for much. Not yet. It had been 4 days. I didn't count them on purpose, but I knew. I kept track the way I always had, by chores completed, by how many nights the barn lantern had flickered through the slats, by the number of clean tin plates I found waiting for me each morning. The 3 women hadn't left. They hadn't asked to come inside the house either. That mattered to me. I wasn't sure why, but it did. That morning, as the sun crept low over the ravine, I stepped out with a bucket of oats and found Lyra already there. Her ankle was still swollen, but she stood barefoot in the hard soil, sleeves rolled to her elbows, feeding the mule with her hands. The animal took to her, didn't buck, didn't flinch. I watched from the steps a moment longer than I meant to. Her dress hung looser, now worn at the seams. The collar had fallen lower, exposing more of her shoulders and the thin scarring on her chest. She hadn't fixed it. Not out of carelessness, but maybe out of exhaustion. Or maybe because she had stopped worrying about it. I cleared my throat softly. Lyra turned, saw me, and hesitated. But she didn't pull the fabric up. She looked me in the eye. Not for long, but long enough. Then she turned back to the mule. "You don't have to feed it," I said, my voice rough from disuse. She didn't look back. "It likes me." I didn't argue. I set the bucket down and rubbed the scar on my jaw with the side of my thumb. The air smelled of dry hay and cold ash. After a moment, I asked the question I hadn't yet. "You 3 running from someone?" Lyra's body stiffened. The moment stretched. Ayla's voice came from behind me. "We are not runaways." She stood near the well arms, crossed, her dark eyes sharp. Her lip had begun to heal, but the cut still pulled at her words. "We were taken," she said flatly. "From a camp near the Verde. Men named Reed and 4 others. Claimed they came with food and trade. Tied up the men, took what they wanted. We got away 2 nights later. I didn't need to ask what took what they wanted meant. I didn't need to. Bastards were drunk when we slipped out." Ayla continued, her voice low and hard. "Took a mule, crossed the creek near Silver Rock, lost the mule and kept going." She jerked her chin toward the ridge. "Heard from a woman in Brennertown there was a man up here who didn't ask questions." "I don't," I said. Silence settled again, colder now. Ayla added, "We don't mean to cause you trouble. We just need a place until it's safe to move on." I didn't reply. I just looked at them. Ayla standing like she was holding up the world. Lyra, who hadn't turned back yet. And Mina sitting small by the barn wall, barely speaking. They had brought nothing with them. No bags, no bedding, no shoes. Nothing a person would bring if they had a choice. "You got people left?" I asked. "No," Ayla said. "Not anymore." I nodded slowly once. That afternoon I let them inside. Only the front room, the kitchen, the table, the stove. Nothing more. I didn't sit. I just left a folded quilt and a few clean clothes on the table. They were Lyra's old things. I hadn't touched them since the day she died. I didn't say where they came from. Didn't explain. I just left the room and closed the door behind me. When I came back near sundown, the clothes were gone. The quilt had been folded again, neater than before, and a pot of beans simmered on the stove. The fire was banked, the floor swept. A plate sat on the table with hot cornbread and boiled eggs. No one said anything about it. That night, Lyra stood on the porch alone. Her dress had been mended roughly at the shoulder with thick gray thread. It held better now. She watched the stars without speaking. I leaned against the post, my arms folded. "Thank you," she said, barely audible. I didn't answer, but she didn't seem to expect one. Inside, Ayla stirred the coals while Mina hummed low under her breath, wrapped in the quilt I'd given them. The hum wasn't cheerful. It was low, tired, but it was something. For the first time in a long while, the house wasn't quiet. It was something else. Something alive. And I wasn't sure yet what to make of that. The days settled into a rhythm neither of us planned nor spoke of. I rose before first light, lit the stove, split wood, and walked the fence lines. When I returned around mid-morning, the porch steps had already been swept, the ash pan emptied, and the barn mucked out. The women didn't wait for instruction. They worked without being asked, without needing to be thanked. Lyra's ankle improved slowly. She moved with a noticeable limp, but pushed through it carrying water buckets with both hands washing my extra shirts without being told. When I tried to carry the pail myself one morning, she took it from me firmly. "I can," she said. I let go. Ayla was harder to read. She didn't trust easily, I could see that. But she didn't challenge me either. She moved through the house with a purpose, inspecting walls, checking the pantry clearing brush away from the foundation. She asked once if there was a rifle she could use for hunting. I told her I had a spare. She didn't press it further, but from then on she made sure to stack firewood higher, cut more kindling, and keep the rifle near the door when I wasn't home. Mina remained quiet. The girl barely left her sister's sides. She clung to routine like a tether, sweeping the barn twice a day, brushing the mule with slow, deliberate strokes, and sorting dry beans into neat little piles on the porch table. She had a habit of humming when she worked, always the same low, comforting rhythm. It filled the air with a strange kind of calm. She still flinched at loud noises. She still wouldn't speak when men rode by on the far ridge. It was the third morning of the new rhythm when I found myself standing by the woodpile watching them move through the yard. Not for any reason. I was just there. They didn't belong to me and I didn't belong to them. But something had shifted. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the ridge, Ayla came inside carrying 2 rabbits she'd trapped. Her tunic sleeves were rolled up, revealing her strong forearms, and her skirt was muddy to the knees. I sat at the table, sewing a tear in a saddlebag. "Boil them," Ayla asked, motioning toward the rabbits. I nodded. "Use the garlic in the jar above the hearth. A little salt. You know how to cook." "My wife used to," I said. Ayla paused, her expression softening just a little. "You never remarried?" I didn't answer that. Didn't need to. That night we all ate together for the first time. No words about it, no ceremony. Just 4 tin plates and a shared pot. Mina said thank you. Lyra watched me as she ate, her eyes resting on my hands more than my face. After supper, as they cleared the table, Lyra lingered behind while Ayla helped Mina to the barn. "You married long?" she asked quietly, her eyes on the empty plate in her hands. 8 years. "Did you love her?" I didn't look at her. I stood by the stove, feeding in one more split log. "Yes." Lyra nodded slowly. She didn't cry, but her next question came after a long silence. "Did she die here in the house?" "Number in town." My voice was flat, controlled. "Measles took her and the baby." Lyra's hand twitched at the plate. "I'm sorry," I didn't reply. She set the plate down gently. As she turned to go, I spoke again. "Lyra, you ain't safe yet." She stopped. "Reed and his men," I continued. "You think they still looking?" "I know they are." I turned, looking at her straight. "Then we'll deal with it when it comes." It wasn't a promise, but it wasn't nothing either. Later that night, when the house had gone still and the oil lamp was turned low, I sat at the edge of the porch again. I didn't sleep much these days. Never had. The sound of crickets buzzed out in the brush, and an owl called once from the canyon mouth. The barn door creaked slightly. I looked up. Lyra stepped out, wrapped in the same patched shawl she had worn the first night. Her hair hung loose. She didn't speak. She walked to the steps, stood beside me, then slowly sat down, leaving space between us, but not much. After a while, she whispered, "Why'd you let us stay?" I thought about that. Was it because of the bruises? Because of the silence? Because I had seen too many people turned away for too little? I shook my head once. "Didn't seem right to send you off." She nodded, quiet for a while. "Some folks would have. I ain't some folks." She smiled faintly, and that was it. No more words, no touching, just 2 people sitting in the dark. Not running, not asking, just staying. By the 7th day, things began to settle like they were meant to be that way. The ranch was quiet, but not empty anymore. I heard movement in the morning before I even got out of bed. Ayla walking across the porch, the soft sound of her footsteps on the kitchen floor, the scrape of firewood being stacked, and Mina's hum, always that low and even tune. Just enough to let the world know she was still breathing. The barn had become their space by silent agreement. The women still slept in the loft, though I had left the bedroom across the hall empty and clean. They never asked to come in. I never told them not to. That morning, as I shaved over the wash basin, I caught my own reflection and paused. The scar on my cheek looked deeper than it used to. The gray in my beard had spread. I didn't look like someone a woman would trust, let alone 3 of them. And yet they stayed. I walked outside and found Lyra crouched by the vegetable patch, her long hair braided down her back sleeves, rolled again to the elbow. Her dress was stitched tight at the bust, now no longer hanging from her like it had that first night. Still low at the neckline but secure. Her chest rose and fell steadily as she worked. She glanced up when she heard my boots on the gravel. "You ever had beans grow this slow before?" she asked. "They're late." "Frost came too early this year," I said. "Won't see much until October." She wiped her brow at the back of her wrist. "Feels good to do something real." I nodded. "Hard work keeps the noise down." Lyra stood and met my gaze fully. She didn't look away this time. "There's a lot of noise in me," she said. I didn't answer. Didn't have to. That afternoon a rider came. Not close, but close enough. I saw the dust cloud from the North Rim Trail. One rider moving slow. Not a lawman. Not a trader, no wagon. The horse was dark. The man sat easy, scanning the ground. I stepped into the house, took my rifle down from the wall, and loaded it calmly. I didn't panic. I just watched from the backside of the house as the rider crested the far ridge and stopped. He waited a long while, then turned and rode back the way he came. At supper, I told them. Ayla stiffened. "You see his face? Number, he didn't come close enough. Could be one of Reed's." "Could." She stared at the wall, then stood. "We'll leave before dark." I didn't move. "You're not going anywhere." Ayla looked at me defiant. "You said it yourself." "They're still looking." "Running now won't help," I said, my voice low and firm. "You got food. You got walls. You got someone who'll shoot back if it comes to that." She didn't argue. Not because she agreed, but because she knew I wasn't wrong. Later that night, Lyra stayed behind after the dishes were done. Mina had gone to bed early and Ayla stood out by the fence, silent under the stars. Lyra came to the doorway where I sat oiling my rifle. "Why are you helping us?" she asked again, her voice a quiet plea. I looked up. She was barefoot, standing in the doorway in that same patched dress, her arms folded under her chest. "You don't know us. You didn't do anything to deserve what was done to you," I said. "That's enough." She nodded, then walked over and sat beside me. Not close, but closer than before. "I wasn't touched," she said after a moment. "Not like Ayla was or what they tried with Mina. They tried with me too, but I ran and I kept running. I didn't stop. I didn't look at her. I set the rifle down. Doesn't matter whether they got close or not," I said. "You carry it just the same." She looked at my hands, rough and scarred, then gently placed hers over mine. "I know you carry things too." We didn't speak for a while after that. Then Lyra leaned her head on my shoulder just once, just long enough for the world to quiet. And I didn't pull away. A week passed after the rider was spotted. No one else came down that trail, but the tension stayed. Ayla took to walking the perimeter twice a day, always with my old Winchester strapped to her back. She said little, but her eyes missed nothing. The bruises on her arms had faded, but the guarded way she stood hadn't. I didn't stop her. I'd seen women break from silence before, and Ayla wasn't breaking. She was sharpening. Mina had begun to speak in full sentences again, especially around the animals. She helped brush down the mule every morning, fed the chickens without being told, and sat near my workbench in the barn in the evenings watching me file tools or hammer new hinges. She didn't ask questions, but she stayed close. I had noticed something too. Something I hadn't expected. I no longer listened for silence. I listened for their movements. A creak of the porch, Lyra's voice, humming softly over the bean pot, Mina dragging a chair across the floor too loudly. It should have annoyed me. Years ago it might have. Now I found myself waiting for it. That morning, while stacking lumber near the barn, Lyra came out with 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to me. I took it with a nod. "I fixed the hem on that flannel shirt you left by the wash basin," she said. "Seemed a waste to throw it out." "It was," I said. She smiled a little, her eyes squinting in the sun, then turned and leaned against the fence beside me. "You always been alone since her?" she asked. "Mostly. No brothers, folks. Dead long before." She nodded, taking a slow sip. "You ever think about leaving here?" she asked. "Number. Why not?" I glanced at her. I built it with her. Every board, every gate, every inch of fence. Don't know how to leave that behind. Lyra's hand rested on the top rail. Her fingers brushed mine by accident. She didn't pull away. Neither did I. "We never had a place," she said quietly. "Not really. Camp to camp. Army moved us twice. Then the traders. Then Reed." She looked toward the hills. "This place. It's the first time I've ever slept without dreaming of running." I didn't answer, but something in my chest shifted. Not pain, not comfort either. Just a weight. A familiar one. That evening, as dusk settled in, a horse approached. Not a stranger this time. Tom Belden, a local from Haven, rode up the trail and dismounted by the fence. I met him outside, my rifle resting under one arm, not lifted but visible. Tom raised a hand. "Ain't trouble. Just came to warn you." "Warn me." "There's talk in town. That bounty trader Reed is asking about 3 Apache girls that went missing near the Verde. Claims he paid for them. Says they're runaways. No proof, just noise. But he's putting up flyers. Offering coin." My jaw tightened. The town marshal ain't lifting a finger. Says he don't meddle with property disputes unless they're in town limits. Tom glanced toward the barn. "That flyer reaches the wrong sort, they'll come sniffing. Just so you're away." Tom reached into his saddlebag and handed me a folded sheet. The flyer. It showed sketches, crude but unmistakable: Ayla's angular face, Mina's timid eyes, even Lyra's neckline drawn lower than it was real. Beneath it read fugitives. Property. Stolen from contract. Reward paid on return. I folded the paper slowly and shoved it into my coat. "You sure you know what you're doing?" Stone Tom asked. "I do." Tom tipped his hat and rode off. That night I brought the flyer inside. Lyra was at the stove. Ayla and Mina sat near the table. The moment I laid it down, the air changed. Mina stood. "He found us." I looked at her. "He hasn't. Not yet." Ayla's hands curled into fists. "He will." "Not here," I said. Lyra stepped forward, her eyes scanning the sketch of herself. "You don't ever do this," she said. "You didn't ask for us." "I didn't ask for trouble either," I said. "But it came. And you're still here. That means something." I looked at Lyra. "I can go into town tomorrow. Make it legal." Ayla stiffened. "Legal how? A name on paper means no man can claim you," I said. "Not even Reed. If I marry one of you, the law protects you." Mina's breath caught. Ayla frowned. "That's not what we want." "I'm not offering it as a bargain," I said. "You don't owe me a damn thing. But it's what I can do, and I won't do it unless one of you says it yourself." The room was silent long enough for the fire to pop. Then Lyra stepped forward. "I'll take your name," she said, her voice a quiet tremor. Ayla looked at her surprised but said nothing. Lyra moved to my side. "I'm not doing it to hide," she said, looking straight into my eyes, her expression fierce and determined. "I'm doing it because I feel safe here for the first time. Because you didn't ask me for anything. Because you stay." My chest rose once. Then I nodded. "Then we go tomorrow." And just like that, the decision was made. No rings, no dress, no proposal. But for Lyra, it meant survival. And for me, it meant something else entirely. Something I hadn't let myself want in a long time. A reason to stay alive. The morning we rode into Haven, the wind was still. I saddled the mule before sunrise. I didn't speak much, just tightened the cinch, checked the hooves, and handed Lyra the folded shawl she'd worn that first night. She took it wordlessly and wrapped it over her shoulders. Her dress was clean, mended along the shoulder and sides. Still plain, still low at the neckline. The top curve of her chest visible when she moved, but she didn't fix it anymore. She didn't have to. Ayla watched us from the porch, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Mina stood beside her, hugging the worn blanket around her shoulders, silent but alert. "You sure about this?" Ayla asked. Lyra nodded. "I ain't doing it for papers," she said. "I'm doing it because I want to stop running." I gave Ayla a look, firm and quiet. I wasn't going to argue. By the time we reached town, the sun was high and cold. Haven wasn't big. 3 streets wide, one main road and a half-built church tower casting a long shadow over the marshal's office. A few faces turned as we passed. A few whispered. I ignored them. So did Lyra. She sat straight on the saddle behind me, her hands resting loosely on the horn. We stopped in front of the old clapboard courthouse. Inside, the air smelled like ink and dried paper. Judge Conincade looked up from his desk, squinted through round spectacles, and raised a brow. "Stone," he said. "Ain't seen you in years." I nodded. "Need to file marriage papers." The judge leaned back, looked at Lyra. "She willing?" "I am Lyra," said, stepping forward. Her voice didn't shake. Conincade studied her for a second. "You sure this ain't to cover trouble?" "It's to stop it," I said. The judge shrugged. "You know how to sign, miss?" Lyra nodded. "Yes, sir." And that was all it took. I signed first, then Lyra. The judge stamped the page, slid a copy across the desk, and muttered something about bureaucrats always being late with fees. When we stepped back outside, the wind had picked up again, dry and sharp, kicking snow along the boardwalk. We stood there for a moment. Lyra looked up at me. "You're going to kiss me?" she asked, softly but serious. I glanced around the street, then back at her. "If you want. I wouldn't have signed if I didn't." She stepped toward me. Their height difference was clear. She looked up, her shoulders steady. I hesitated, not from doubt but from a profound respect. Then I cupped her cheek and leaned down. The kiss was slow, solid, not showy, not rushed, but it meant something. It meant everything. When we pulled apart, Lyra's hand stayed on my chest for a second longer than necessary. On the ride back, she leaned into me a little more. Back at the ranch, Ayla didn't say much. She just nodded when Lyra handed her the stamped paper. Mina peeked over Ayla's shoulder, her lips parting slightly when she saw the name Lyra Stone. Later that night, we all sat around the table. The stew Ayla had cooked simmered on the stove. A quiet calm settled in the house that hadn't been there before. Lyra took my hand under the table. Just held it. Her fingers were small, strong. She didn't look at me. She didn't need to. That night, I didn't sleep in my bed alone. She came to me after the others were asleep. She didn't ask. She just stepped into the doorway, the lamplight behind her, catching on her collarbone the curve of her chest where the neckline dipped. She looked at me, quiet and steady. I stood from the chair without saying a word. When she reached for my shirt, I led her. When she guided my hand to her waist, I didn't pull back. We didn't rush. There were no declarations, just the soft sound of two people who had carried too much for too long, and had finally found a place to set it down. By morning, she was still in my arms, and the house, for the first time in years, didn't feel like a place built from loss. It felt like home. Morning came slow and cold. The wood stove crackled in the corner, and outside the wind rattled the shutters like it always did before the weather turned. I stirred awake with Lyra still pressed against me, her breathing deep and steady, her hand resting flat over my chest. The quilt had slipped low, baring her shoulder and collarbone, her skin warm against the morning chill. She didn't wake when I rose, didn't flinch when I quietly covered her again. That was new. I moved through the house quietly, not needing a light. My body knew every floorboard, every squeak. By the time I stepped onto the porch, the sun hadn't yet cleared the ridge. I sat there, rifle across my lap boots, cold coffee mug in hand. It was a routine, but everything felt different. I wasn't alone anymore. Inside, I heard movement. Bare feet on pine, a pan clinking on the counter. Ayla up early, like always. She kept the place running like a soldier ran a camp. There was no softness to her in the mornings, just a fierce focus and efficiency. But she hadn't said a word about the night before. Hadn't needed to. It was Mina who broke the silence. Just before noon, she came to me near the barn, barefoot, dragging a worn blanket around her shoulders. Her eyes looked clearer than they had in days. "I want to stay," she said, her voice low but firm. I turned to her. "You are. I mean, even if they come." I nodded once. "They'll have to go through me first." She looked down, then back up. "You do that for all of us." "For family," I said. She smiled, just a little. By late afternoon, Lyra joined me out near the fence. She wore one of my old flannel shirts over her dress now, sleeves rolled high, a thin belt tied at her waist. She looked different, still Lyra, but steadier, less hunted. She leaned against the post beside me. "You ever think we'd come to a place like this?" she asked. "I didn't think much about anything before you three showed up. You regret it?" I looked at her, shook my head. Number A moment passed. She nudged my arm. "I was worried you'd be cold in the mornings. I've been cold for 10 years. She smiled. "Not anymore." Later that night, the quiet was broken by hooves. 4 riders. They came slow down the main trail. No torches, no banners, just the sound of iron and saddle leather cutting through the dark. I stepped out onto the porch with a rifle already loaded. Ayla stood behind me holding the second rifle. Lyra was inside with Mina, the shutters closed and the lamps out. The riders stopped just beyond the fence. One of them stepped down. Broad shoulders, a clean coat, a well-groomed beard. "Reed." "Evening," he called out calmly. "We're just looking for what's ours." I said nothing. Reed continued. 3 scores. One of them tall and loud, one with a limp, one a little too young. Belonged to me. Took off about a month back. There's a bounty on all 3. I raised my rifle. Slow. Deliberate. They belong to no one. And there's no bounty for married women. Reed chuckled. "You married one." "She took my name," I said. "So if you're looking to claim anything on this land, you'll be meeting iron first." Silence stretched. Then another rider shifted in his saddle. You're going to start a war over women's stone. I already did, I said. A long time ago. But this time I'll finish it faster. Behind me, Ayla stepped forward, not afraid, not shaking. You've got 2 minutes to turn around, she said, her voice flat. And I suggest you use both. Reed looked at her. You always had a mouth, and I'll still have one when you're gone. I stepped forward. You want to push this. You won't make it off this land. I won't ask again. The wind picked up, whipping a fine snow across the yard. Reed looked around, saw the fence line, the dark windows, the steady hands. He wasn't ready to die for it. He spit into the dirt, then turned his horse. Not worth the lead, he muttered. Let him rot out here. The 4 riders turned and rode off slow and bitter, but they didn't look back. I stood still until the sound of hooves vanished over the ridge. Then I lowered the rifle. Behind me, the door opened. Lyra stepped out, her eyes wide. They're gone, she asked. I nodded. She stepped forward, wrapped her arms around my waist, and pressed her face into my chest. Why'd you do it, she whispered. I rested my hand on her back. Because you're mine now. And this time she didn't correct me. Because she was. The days that followed passed quieter than anyone expected. Reed didn't return. No more riders. No more threats. It left a tension in the air, something like waiting for a storm that never came. But I kept watch just the same. I checked the traps more often, rode the ridge twice a day, and made sure the rifles were cleaned and loaded. Inside the house, something else shifted. Lyra began sleeping in my bed each night without hesitation. Her presence no longer felt like a visitor's. She folded her clothes beside mine, stirred the stew pot when I was late returning, and leaned her head on my shoulder during long silences. We didn't speak much of the marriage. There was nothing to say. It wasn't romantic in the way most would expect, but it was real. It was calm, and it was chosen. She had started planting again, winter vegetables, this time low to the ground. Ayla helped her clear the last row that morning while I repaired a sagging section of fence. I watched them work together, quiet and steady. Neither woman smiled often, but both of them had begun to move with more ease, their shoulders less tight, their eyes no longer scanning the tree line every 5 minutes. At supper that night, Mina spoke more than usual. She had begun to read slowly, with Lyra guiding her through the words in a weathered primer I had dug out of an old trunk. The girl still didn't like loud voices or strangers, but she no longer looked like she was planning to run at any given moment. That was something. Ayla sat at the table afterward, her arms folded, watching me over her cup of coffee. You meant what you said, she asked. I usually do, I said. About all of us being family. I met her eyes. I don't say things I don't mean. She nodded slow. I ain't want to be owned. You never were, I said. And no one here expects you to be anything but yourself. She looked away, her jaw tight, but her voice softened just a little. I just don't want anyone mistaking kindness for permission. They won't. That night, Lyra stood beside the window, brushing her hair slowly, the lamplight catching on her collarbone, the front of a dress open just enough to show the swell of her chest beneath the fabric. She wore it that way without shame now, without apology. She turned to me. You don't look at me like I'm broken, she said. You're not, I replied. I thought I was. You're not, I repeated. She came to me barefoot across the creaking floor and sat beside me on the edge of the bed. I didn't want to need anyone, she whispered. Needing ain't weakness, I said. Staying is harder than running. She nodded, then leaned into me. My arms wrapped around her. Slow, steady. She pressed her forehead to my neck, her voice low. I'm late, she said. I didn't react right away. I pulled back slightly, looking into her eyes. You sure? I've counted. It's not the first time I've worried, but this feels different. I know. I searched her face. You want that? I don't know, she admitted. But with you, I don't feel afraid of it. I nodded. Then we take it one day at a time. We didn't speak after that. There was no joy or panic, just a quiet understanding. If it came, we'd face it. If it didn't, we'd still wake up in the same bed beside the same person, who had never asked for anything but presence. In the early hours before dawn, Lyra lay cold against me, her hand resting over her lower belly. Outside, the wind shifted again. It was colder now. The seasons were turning, but the house held warmth. And for the first time since the women had arrived, the past no longer felt louder than the present. The snow came earlier than expected. By late October, the higher ridges were dusted white, and the mornings turned bitter. The wind came down sharper, and the animals drank less. I made a second chimney for the barn stove, fixed the leak in the roof myself before the freeze could settle into the beams. I'd spent 15 winters up here alone. I knew what was coming, but this one was different. Lyra sat in front of the fire now, with Mina curled beside her, wrapped in a quilt and trying to sound out words from the same worn book. Ayla had taken to the fields and firewood like a foreman, prepping the root cellar and salting down the last of the venison. There was no question anymore whether they were staying. They already had, and I had changed. I caught myself smiling more, not wide, not often, but enough that it surprised me. I still didn't speak much, but the silence in the house didn't carry weight like before. Now it carried a peace, a shared rhythm. No one asked me for more than I could give, and somehow I gave more anyway. That morning, Lyra stood beside the stove, staring down at the pot of coffee with a hand resting over her lower belly. She hadn't said anything new since that night weeks ago, but the way she moved slower, the way her appetite shifted, the way she kept unconsciously touching her middle, it said enough. She turned when she felt my eyes on her. I was sitting in the rocker by the window, boots off, cup in hand. "I think it's real," she said. I stood and crossed the room. She didn't flinch. I placed a hand over hers. "Then it's ours," I said. She looked at me, her eyes wet but steady. "You sure?" I nodded. I never thought I'd be a father again. Never thought I deserved to be. But this ain't about the past. Ayla entered just then, carrying in a bundle of kindling, the cold still clinging to her shoulders. "There's deer tracks near the edge of the ridge," she said, dropping the wood near the stove. "Small ones. Might be a late buck. Could be meat." She looked between us, noticed Lyra's hand, said nothing, but something softened behind her eyes. "I'll hunt it," I said. "I'll go with you," Ayla replied. "No need." "I know, but I want to." I nodded. We left at midday. The snow was light, barely covering the ground, just enough to quiet the world underfoot. We didn't talk much as we rode toward the ridge. When we dismounted near a line of junipers, Ayla finally spoke. "You're not what I expected." "I never was," I said. She looked at me. "You think I'm angry all the time. I think you're carrying a weight no one helped you with." She considered that. "You helped us, but we never really asked why." "You didn't need to," I said. "Some things are just right when they happen." We tracked the deer in silence. We took down a young buck before dusk. As I gutted it by the stream, Ayla paused. "Lyra told me." I stopped cutting, looked at her. She said she thinks she's carrying. I nodded once. "She is. You ready for that?" "No," I said honestly. "But I will be." That night we returned with the meat. Mina ran to meet us in the yard, barefoot in the snow, until Ayla barked at her to go back inside. Lyra stood on the porch, both hands clasped together, waiting. When I climbed the steps, she took one look at me and nodded. "I'm sure now," she said quietly. "I missed again. And I know." I wrapped my arms around her without a word. That night we sat around the fire, all four of us, plates full, stomachs warm. The storm outside was building, the snow thickening by the hour, but no one seemed to mind. Ayla leaned back in the rocker, her eyes half shut. "I don't need papers," she said. "Don't need promises. But if you ever want to make this permanent, I'd stay." I looked at her. Mina giggled softly from under her blanket. "You've already stayed," I said. "That's what counts." Lyra reached for my hand and pressed it to her stomach. And in that moment there was nothing missing. No loose ends, no debts. Owed, no danger left. Only four people who had come through hell in different ways, now under one roof with one name and one future. The storm raged through the night, but inside that cabin it was warm, and we stayed. Enjoying these epic Wild West stories? Hit subscribe for more gripping tales of bravery, conflict, and unexpected heroes. Now tap the video on screen to experience a story with a twist you'll never forget.